Your quest to slay the evil wizard has brought you to a simple oaken door inside the catacombs. What do?
I cast Fireball.
The door explodes, and on the inside you see a frail old man cloaked in blood-red robes. He points a gnarled finger towards you and says, "Welcome to Podpodcastcast!" Hello, and welcome to Podpodcastcast. It's a podcast where we talk about other podcasts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Honor.
And today, I'm scared.
Uh-huh.
Honor, we're talking about Critical Role, Exandria Unlimited, Calamity.
Yep.
2 subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
Honor, what are we getting into today?
So, this is from Critical Role. Already scary.
I'm quaking.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me quake, listener? Quake. Shudder, quake.
This guy's quaking. Critical Role, Beast of a Podcast. Exandria Unlimited is their series of series that they do to look into different parts of this giant world Exandria that Matthew Mercer has created, that Critical Role takes place in, and they take on other DMs and stuff. And Calamity is the Calamity, the historical event that's like ancient history in all of this. So already, now, you're scared and lost.
I am scared and lost, and I think our listeners might be as well. So I think the D&D heads who are here know what you're talking about. But if you're not a D&D head, Critical Role is the biggest Dungeons & Dragons real play podcast.
Yes.
So they play the nerd role-playing game where you get your little dice and you pretend to be an elf, Dungeons & Dragons. It's very famous in the scene. I don't know the timeline. You may know the chronology better than me, but it kind of exploded and I think really made Dungeons & Dragons podcasting a thing.
Yeah, I would say so.
One may not necessarily think to, publicize you calling yourself Grimbor, the half, orc.
Yeah. And they didn't. This was originally a home game that these people just played, and then someone was like, hey, this is entertaining. You should stream this on twitch.tv.
Right. And so they stream it online so you could watch it, and it's also a podcast so you can listen to it, and it's absolutely huge now. So to review Critical Role, I think is a fool's errand. So we're not going to attempt to review Critical Role. We're going to talk about one miniseries that they did. Yeah.
But I did review Critical Role on this podcast.
I thought that was a fool's errand. And I said,
okay,
you're a foolish boy.
I understand now.
Foolish. Go back to the village.
Uh-huh.
Eat your schnitzel. Wear your dunce cap.
On it, boss.
Yeah, so Critical Role is absolutely huge. So we're going to just talk about one miniseries that they did, which itself I still think is a beast of a podcast.
I think it's normal.
Honor, you're wrong.
I'm correct.
This is such an ongoing debate between us. And, the listeners haven't, emailed in to settle this discussion.
Yeah.
Which I really take to be kind of like they don't want to intervene. If the parents are fighting, you don't want to side with one. Even though dad's right, like you don't want to say that.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
I'm dad.
Can't recommend it enough. Just looking at your friend's eyes saying, I'm dad.
I'm dad.
So, for Critical Role, this is a miniseries. There are only 4 episodes. So you can look up Critical Role Calamity, and there will be 4 episodes. They are 4 hours, 5 hours, and 6.
Yep.
So, 8 plus 11 is 19. 19 hours. That's so much podcast.
That's a normal amount of podcast.
You are wrong about that.
How long do you think a regular podcast? Like a full podcast.
Like, what do you mean by a full podcast? You're talking about an audio drama. That's what you mean.
Yes.
I'm thinking a normal episode for an audio drama is 30 minutes. Okay? And so we're doing 19 times 2. That's 38. That's 38 episodes. That's long.
That feels fairly normal.
That's because you live in the stretched out, like, it's hyperspace above reality.
Because I actually think a more normal time frame, I think like 45 minutes-ish is a more standard, like median length for an audio drama episode. I think 30 is like normal but a little short, but as soon as you get to sub 30, that's short.
Maybe 20. I think 30 is fairly normal. Audio dramas are hard to produce.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference with Dungeons & Dragons, and specifically how they do it in Critical Role as a format, is that this is live streamed over the internet, so there's no editing.
Yeah.
So they're not cutting anything down. It's 4 hours of everything.
Yeah. Which is honestly impressive, because it's really easy to do an unedited 4 hours of just talking and have it be really bad.
Sure. Yes. So what makes Critical Role different, there's lots of Dungeons & Dragons podcasts out there, but what makes Critical Role different especially is that all the cast are voice actors, more or less, right?
Yes.
And
this is their tagline.
Yes. So it's not just dudes playing Dungeons & Dragons, it's actors playing Dungeons & Dragons. So that's why it's almost more like an audio drama than the normal D&D podcast.
Absolutely.
So, yes, they can do 4 hours of live improv.
Yeah.
Which
every week
sounds like it should crush the soul, and perhaps it does. So, speaking of crushing the soul,
yay!
Let's get into the plot of this podcast. Honor, if it works for you, I want to kind of talk about the plot, and then I want to get into how that plot makes me feel.
Yeah.
And then all the other different parts about how this is different than other D&D podcasts and all that good stuff. The plot of Calamity, as it plays out over 19 hours, is a story of destruction. It's a tragedy, as you called it before we got on mic, which I think is accurate. I don't know anything about the extended world of Critical Role. This is the first time I've really listened to Critical Role. I think I mentioned during your Critical Role review, when you talked about it, like the second episode we made, that I had tried to listen to it once, heard some guy be like, "Oh, I like grog," and then I was done. I'm like,
no, his name is Grog.
Yeah, whatever, the same thing. And I was like, I actually can't take this. This is, I don't like it. And then I left.
Too much nerd for you, nerd?
It felt, a little bit. It was almost too sincere. I felt, I was cringed by that. And we can dive into my psyche some other time.
Yeah.
So, I don't know anything about the extended world. I know that there is, like you talked about, the DM, the Dungeon Master, Matt Mercer, famous, is lauded in the D&D community, especially for not only for making Dungeons & Dragons a thing in podcasting, but also making Dungeons & Dragons more popular in general. Yes. Matt Mercer and the creative team have come up with this whole world and a history and all the deepest lore building that all the little nerds that play Elder Scrolls have so badly wanted.
Yes.
So I don't know anything about that. I know that this is supposed to be a historical event. I didn't care. I'm here for the story that was told to me.
Yeah, which, to be fair, is very much a way you could go about it, because a lot of this sort of lore is stuff that connects to their first campaign, which I have not even listened to. So a lot of it, even for me, having listened to a bunch of Critical Role, I'm like, I actually don't really know anything about the Calamity, except that it was the Calamity and happened in history. And even some of the actors on this, they had no idea of the history either. So I think it can seem very daunting being like, oh, this is a huge historical event in this very deep lore that's created, but actually I think you can get into it without really knowing.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I think it might seem daunting if you are in the nerdosphere and you're like, I know a bunch of my buddies are in a Critical Role, and it's like a big thing for them, and they're like, oh, but don't you know about this thing that happened one time? And you're like, no, I don't. I'm trying.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if you just take this podcast as a story, you're totally fine. It kind of makes sense to have some knowledge that this is supposed to be like a prequel to some other thing that happened.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you interested in the other stories that they've told. And you're like, okay, so if this is the prequel, why did this need to happen for what happens later?
Yeah. I think, if anything, the one aspect about it being a prequel that I think actually matters for enjoying the story is a story, especially one that they're improving, essentially, through D&D, that already has a predetermined ending to an extent because we know how this historical event ends. It's a tragedy where going into the story, you already know these people aren't going to save the world. Like some crazy catastrophic thing is going to happen. And I think just that very vague idea is really all you need to know going into it, and it's something they say, but you don't need to know the specific, like, oh, this is gonna ruin Kath Moira and the lore. The lore, you don't need to know the lore. Don't worry, just know it will be sad.
Yes. So let's go through the plot really quick. We start our story on the flying city of Avalier. Once the peak of a mountain that has been raised out of the ground by wizards and is now a city that travels the world trading with people. We meet a group of peeps on that city. They're called the Ring of Brass is the name that they give themselves. They're the shakers and movers of the town. They're the people who are doing all the work really behind the scenes, behind the politics of the magistrates and the highfalutin ways of the courtesans. These are the guys who are really making things happen.
Yeah, which can make it sound a little bit like they're sort of scrappy behind the scenes, but they're also incredibly powerful and affluent. And
yes,
because everyone in the city is super rich and powerful.
Right. It takes fully, I don't know the exact number, but fully 2 hours before we introduce all the characters.
And isn't that beautiful?
That is, I was like, I cannot believe this is happening.
It's so good.
So there are 7 people around the table. The Dungeon Master is Brendan Lee Mulligan, whom you love from other things, but he has also done a DM in Dimension 20.
Yes, he's another one of those extremely well-known DMs in that same space as Matthew Mercer type stuff.
So he's been brought in to have the reins of this story. And then there are 6 people playing the game.
This is a smaller table than Critical Role usually has.
You are actually joking right now.
No, that's extremely true.
What is the normal number?
The normal number, I believe, is 7 players. And then they, especially I think in Campaign 3, but in Campaign 3 they often would have 1 or 2 guests.
We'll get into that later about how this is and isn't like real Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a horrifying concept for me.
It's insane.
So there's 6 players. Abria Ironguard, who plays the magical mechanic. Her name is Laren. We got Luis Carrazzo, who's playing Xerxes, who is the Knight of Avalier. He's a paladin, a force for good in the world. We got Marisha Ray, who is credited with creating the series, who plays Pesha Porcode, the descendant of the big guy who raised the mountain into the sky. Sam Regal, who plays Loquacious Seeley, who's a newscaster.
Yep.
And is very charming and handsome. Then we got Travis Willingham, who plays Saret, who is a bird man and a detective.
Yeah.
We got Lou Wilson, who plays Nidus. Oh, which is the money man, the big merchant, former pirate guy.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like that took me 2 hours just to say. It is insane to me. It's so long. It's so long just to introduce the cast.
Though this is a staple of Brendan Lee Mulligan's style. He does this kind of thing with pretty much any campaign he introduces, where he'll dive into each character individually where they are, give them 20 to 30 minutes of just being with that character, and then he moves on to the next one. So this is a staple of Brendan Lee Mulligan's style of DMing, where every first episode, the first 2-ish hours is going through the cast. And isn't that beautiful?
That's okay. It's not inherently bad that it took 2 hours. It is just, if it was real Dungeons and Dragons, that's crazy. And also, if it was any other format of story, that's also crazy. But whatever. So we meet these people. I said all their names for completeness. You don't need to remember their names, because we're not going to spend 19 hours going through the plot. We meet all these people, and we get to learn a little bit about all of them and how they interact with this city of Avalier and the magic and the wizard society that comprises it. We very quickly come to suspect that something is wrong with Avalier. Xerxes, the knight, is getting these dreams that portend of something terrible happening.
Yeah, the series opens with Xerxes' nightmare of encountering the betrayer god, lord of hells, and the dawn father god, and he's dying, and his son's there, and the sky is below him, and the ground is above, and it's really, really intense, really fast.
Yeah, intense is exactly the correct word, because if you were like, I'm ready to hear about goblins like the Lord of the Rings, and they start off with, the gods are fighting, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. Chill a little bit. No chill.
No
chill. So one of the characters is having these dreams that pretend of a calamity in the future. The bird detective man also hears of some wizard who snuck aboard the city from somewhere else and partook in some sort of dark ritual. Then all the characters kind of do their things. They start off the day and they come together for this big party because we're on the eve of a massive celebration, the replenishment where all the magic that Avalier has collected from the world, it touches down back on the ground where it came from, the city does, and releases all the magic. And it's going to be beautiful and wonderful, and everyone's so excited. So our team finally get together to discuss all the bad murmurings they've heard around. They're like, we do think something bad is happening. They discover some suspicious things at this party. Like there's a vial of poison was one of the gifts to Paisha Porco as she hosted this party. What does it mean? Oh no. And they're like, there's some strange things. We're going to go investigate. They go talk to the oracles, the people who see the future. And they've been like, why is the Hall of Prophecy been shut down? And they're like, the oracles are crazy. They say that there's a calamity coming, but that can't be true.
That can't be true.
And they're like, oh my god, it is true. This is taking all of my energy to recount in some way that makes sense. Xerxes, the guy who's having the bad dreams, falls into the mirror dimension where he meets Satan. It's just the devil.
It is
just
the Lord of the Hells. It's the devil.
It's the devil. He meets the devil, who was in his dreams, and the devil's like, no, actually, but I'm like a good guy.
Yeah.
And like...
I think to make that part make a little more sense...
it's not going to make more sense no matter
what
you say.
I've got it.
Okay.
These, devils, bad guys are called the betrayer gods, so this whole time there's this angle of... Because they're all gods, but then some betrayed the other gods, and now they're the devils and stuff. So this whole time he's like, but we're supposed to be brethren, and why am I being left out? Because I'm a betrayer god, but I'm a god, and I love you, Xerxes.
Yes. And as a little bit of foreshadowing, anyone who knows anything about the devil might suspect that something is afoot here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they're like, oh no, something bad really is happening. Then
Leyrin's thing with the Leyrite.
Oh yeah, none of that really matters at all.
It does.
Not at all. Okay, the mechanic girl, she finds out that there is, in order to raise the mountain into the sky to make a city, the wizards had to make a deal with the druids of old. The druids gave them a tree. The tree siphons off energy from the engine that keeps the city in the air. Leyrin figures this out and is just like, why is that happening? I'm not going to have enough energy for this magical ritual that I want to do to make us go to space.
She's been trying to rig the city to be able to travel to other dimensions, other realms. And so while she's been working on this, which has kind of been a behind everyone else's backs thing and a little bit of selfish ambition, she's kind of been undercutting this other ritual with the ancient druids thing, because she's like, I don't know what that's about, and I don't like it, and it's stealing my energy. So there's certain things she's done where she's like, I don't want to give that energy anymore, cut it off, etc., etc. And then it's like, oh, that was important.
Well, and then at that very moment, they're like, oh my gosh, something's happening at the place where they steer the city in the sky. We have to go help the guy who's at the helm of the city. And they all go there, and that guy's been murderated, and also the dean of the college of necromancy is there and is like, I'm evil, actually. And also there's a different devil guy there who's not the devil, but a devil, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then they fight all these dudes, and then I'm not saying anything inaccurately, but I know that if I said this to any human, this doesn't make any sense.
It's so awesome.
We gotta power through. So they fight all the bad dudes. There's cultists. There's devils. They fight them, pew, 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 pew. And they're like, oh my gosh, no. There's these cultists that have risen up throughout the city that are attacking places. They eventually fend them off, and they're like, what the freaking heck is going on around here? And then
I think the one other thing you skipped from the beginning of sort of all this kind of grab bag of things where they're like, there might be something wrong in the city because all these weird things are happening. There's also been a lot of business with, a little while before, there was a very powerful wizard who did a ritual to replace the god of death and became the god of death. And people have been trying to then do that, and then they're like, but what if we replace a bad god instead? And then mess happens.
I don't think that's I don't think
this is correct.
I don't think that's relevant at all. I don't think
no, it is.
The Raven Queen doesn't come up hard like that's
Raven
historical
Queen,
context.
The Raven Queen comes up as, okay, this ritual happened.
Yes.
People were attempting to do that ritual.
Yes.
Then people were like, what if we do a little spin-off to be cute and quirky, and we replace a betrayer god instead? And then through reaching out in those ways, the betrayer gods were able to start getting followers.
I have actually no idea how you got that conclusion, because I did not get that at all from the podcast.
This is true.
It's trust you to believe, listener. We're moving on. Okay, so then I don't think anything else happens. Then they
Nothing. Series over.
Then they go from the fight back to the engine for the city. At the engine for the city, they're like, this freaking tree is stealing our energy. The cultist guys want us to crash land they want us to land in the city, at the bottom, the city under the city, which is where the mountain used to be.
Yeah.
So we got to destroy the tree, so we have enough energy not to do that. So they destroy the tree, but womp, womp, womp.
Wow.
We get a huge lore dump that the tree is actually, the whole time the city is flying through the sky across the world, it's making a magical rune to protect the world from the betrayer gods, from the devil.
Yeah.
And so by destroying the tree, they've let the devil back into the world. And so the devil's there, and also that other guy who the wizard dude you were talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not that one, but a different wizard dude who the bird detective was looking for. He's also there now.
Yeah.
And then
he was one of the wizards that was trying this ritual to like replace gods and stuff, and then he messed up.
Yeah, and then half the team dies, and then the Xerxes, who was like talked to the devil before, was like, "Hey, devil, what's up? I feel like you're being you got kind of bad vibes." And the devil's like, "I'm the devil."
Yeah.
This is not surprising. I am the father of lies.
Yeah.
Pachoo on you. I steal your soul.
Yeah.
And so, but then while the devil's distracted, Xerxes, who's about to have his soul stealing, actually revives the rest of the team, and they do some stuff that doesn't matter at all. And then eventually, they tell people to get off the island. The flying city. It doesn't matter. The flying city.
Hello?
The flying city is collapsing. They tell everyone to get off. They go back, and they're like, we gotta complete a ritual so that the devil doesn't get his other devil friends to come to the real world.
Yeah.
And so there's a final battle between our good guys and some robots plus the bad wizard. And then most of them die except one, and then they complete it, and then the devil's friends are thrown out into outer space. That's the story. That's Honor.
Here's
I know you're going to say some stuff, but that is the most coherent possible explanation that does not take over an hour.
Not true. I'm just going to go over the ending. So, it is, yes, they're doing this ritual thing. The magical architect, who is the person who runs the engine that moves the city and everything, she and the whole ring of brass go back to the engine because they're like, they figured out we can do this one last ritual so that, yes, the betrayer god's other devil friends can't come into the world, and that's better at least because they already know that the devil's here. So it's a lot of these things where it's like we already know the calamity is going to happen, but Nidus, who controls a lot of the riches and the ships and stuff in the city, he's like, I'm going to go redirect the ships so that they don't pick up the elite people who suck and they let the populace escape. That kind of thing. Lots of those things. But then they do this ritual so that the devil friends don't come. And then I personally think, as far as beats in this story and stuff that matters in that way, the big finale part of the ending, even after they do this ritual, the city is still going to crash into the earth. The devil's still already here, but they've stopped at least some of the badness. They've told people they can escape. And there's one member of the Ring of Brass, the Birdman, which is crucial because he can fly, which means he is, because this is a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, he's able to make one really difficult roll to see if he can escape and go back to his family. Just, there's a survivor from this thing, and he does. And so there's one person who makes it out alive, which I think is important.
And then the world is in ruin for like a couple hundred years.
Yep.
And eventually, in the future, the devil is banished, as are all the gods. I think they go into some form of voluntary banishment, and so that the gods retreat from this world and leave men to their ways.
Ooh.
That's the story.
That's the story.
All right, everyone.
Awesome?
I understand that if you need a break after all of that, because it's
so intense, which is, I think, what I love about it.
Yes. Well, and this is like part of the thing with them making so much lore, so much of a complete world, is that constantly they're bringing in other things, and you're like, what? Who's the Raven Queen? Wait, I have to care about this now? How is that? There's the druids? The druids? What about the druids? What is happening? There's just
the ancient magic.
I understand the ancient magic. I was there.
It all connects.
I just think that to explain the story, we skipped over like a bunch of different things.
Well, it's almost like there were 19 hours and we took less than 19 minutes.
Oh, thank God. I really didn't know if we could. All right. So I'm going to say this, and I think you're going to disagree, and I think we'll use that as a jumping off point for our discussion.
Very good.
I think the story for Critical Role, Exandria Unlimited, Calamity is okay. I think it's fine. There's a lot of it, but I think if you stripped back these 19 hours into one fantasy, I don't even think you get a novel out of this. I mean, maybe if you just transcribed all words that were said into a novel, into a short book, I think you would read it beginning to end and you'd be like, this is okay.
I disagree. And also, they didn't write a short novel.
I know. I still feel like the podcast, like the story itself, to strip back the Dungeons and Dragons and...
Well, that's not the point of it.
I made it like, we got to take this piece by piece, okay? We're not going to eat, we can put them all together, but you can't fit this whole sausage in your mouth right now, okay? You got to cut it up, okay? You got to put some relish on there, and then you got to, eat it piece by piece. I think just the story part is fine. It's not exceptional, and I think it's just fine.
Continue.
That's it. I just thought you would yell at me after that. Like, I thought I was really waiting for you to be like, Sam, I think you might be really dumb.
Well, I'm interested because you're like, okay, let's take this piece by piece. Here's what I think of the story. Do you have other pieces you have thoughts about?
Yes, but I wanted to talk about the story first.
Well, I want to hear. To me, it all interacts a lot, which is why I'm like, if I'm going to talk about the story, I'm going to start talking about the medium, and I'm going to start talking about the characters. And it all interlinks as far as why I enjoy it.
Okay. I think the story is just fine. I also think this is Dungeons and Dragons actual play. And it does it different than other Dungeons and Dragons actual play podcasts. There's a bunch of different ways that one can play D&D. It's just playing pretend with your friends. It's like, it's really just like if the nerds from the playground were like, but what if we added rules to Power Rangers? You know? So the D&D part of this is in some ways very much idyllic, very much like the classic D&D image of people sitting around the table and like rolling dice. I think in part because of the way they play Dungeons and Dragons, which is almost very by the book in some ways, I don't think that works the best in a podcast medium. That means there's a lot of time spent rolling dice and doing math. Clearly, it doesn't offend that many people because this is a really big show, but I think from the perspective of the storyteller, of the creator, it's a little inconsiderate of people's time to make them listen to a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter.
Interesting.
It's exciting. Rolling dice is always exciting in Dungeons and Dragons. And so it's like a big moment when they're like, oh my gosh, we're coming up against the wizard. If he has another turn, he's going to cast Fireball and kill us all. Oh, I got a high number. He's dead. Oh my God. That's exciting, right? But there's so many times where it's just like, okay, so I roll to hit 19. Okay, 19 hits. Okay, so wait, no, that's not a spell check. No, okay, so it's 3d6. Oh, but you get +2 from Flibblebob. Okay, Flibblebob gives me +2, and then I get 9 more because I'm tall, and then I roll them all together. Okay, and then one. Like it's long. It's just long bits of like doing math, which I don't think is interesting. And so that's part of the format that they chose to live stream this, which makes it so that they can put one out every week. And their production costs are a lot lower because they don't have to pay someone to edit through this. I mean, the finale is the fourth episode is 6 hours long, and that would be an insane edit. And so they just publish it as is. And I mean, I think it's a waste of my time to listen to, right? And I'm not saying that like, man, this whole podcast is a waste of time. No, there's just like in Dungeons and Dragons, there's just downtime sometimes that's just not engaging. So, I mean, that's another part of it. I have other thoughts on, I think Brennan Lee Mulligan did a great job. Him as a DM could be instructional for other Dungeon Masters. I think him focusing on characters and giving everyone at the table a time to be important and a time to shine and be like, hey, this is your moment. Hey, these are your attachments to other characters. Sarah, you have kids. Loquacious, Laren, you're your ex-husband and wife, and letting them interact and do the role-playing part of Dungeons and Dragons, I think is excellent. And I think this is probably true of Critical Role in general, but certainly I felt like this was true of Brennan Lee Mulligan's handling of this series, is that it is exemplary of what Dungeons and Dragons can be with a group of friends, and that it can be, it can be a great vehicle for telling stories together, right? Dungeons and Dragons is special because telling someone about your Dungeons and Dragons campaign is a little bit like telling someone about your dreams. Yeah. And it's like, no one cares, and it doesn't make any sense.
I mean, we just tried explaining this campaign.
I know, and I felt like I was explaining I felt like I was being like, so I woke up late for my math class.
Yeah, which I think any D&D podcast or any actual play podcast, whatever system that I try to explain to someone, it truly, for better or for worse, is a thing that you have to either listen to / watch, or it just won't make sense and you'll be like, this is insane, and what?
It is Dungeons and Dragons. I love it. I don't remember if I said at the beginning, but you and me, I think it's very clear. We both really like D&D. Yeah. It's a fun game, and it is a really cool format to hang out with people because you get to be the characters in Lord of the Rings, in whatever story, because you are the characters. It is able to generate real emotions in a way that other things don't, Like, I can watch a story be told on a movie, and unless it's Interstellar, I'm probably not going to cry. But I can have, something very silly, or there could be a very silly campaign, of Dungeons and Dragons sessions I'm playing with my friends. But when my real friend who's sitting next to me, they are on the brink of death, their character. I'm invested in that in a way that is not the same as with other kinds of stories because that's me and that's them, and I'm like, you get this other kind of connection which is almost hard to describe, but it almost with less effort solicits emotion. Not that D&D is no effort. I mean, as anyone who's tried D&D for the first time will know, it's filling out spreadsheets for fun. So I like D&D a lot, but it can kind of be hard to tell these stories to other people. I think Brendan Lee Mulligan did a great job as a DM here. You ready to hop in yet?
Yeah, I think you kind of, in talking about why I love D&D, got into part of why I love actual play podcasts and why I can definitely understand being like, I don't want to listen to all the math that they do in combat. To an extent, I get it, but I don't necessarily agree, because I think this is a whole process where people are very invested, and you, in listening along, become invested in these same things. At least for me, like, D&D becomes a way to set up tense moments or moments for chances of failure and that kind of thing in all of these dice rolls. So then things like combat become, there's a lot of chances for failures, there's a lot of chances for really exciting success, because there's all these dice rolls and there's all these things of like, are my skills going to be enough? Is it enough to have my paladin friends boost to my saving throw? Is that going to be the thing that saves me? Hearing all of these little details and how they can come together to make moments, that is something that's interesting to me.
But I do want to note that those moments are rare. It's not like, when they're fighting these cultists, it's not like every single dice throw is like, oh my gosh, this is critical. It's, once, twice, maybe 3 times in a 4-hour episode where they're like, oh my gosh, is this going to work out? Oh, no, but okay, can you help me in? Yes, okay. No, or like, yes.
Yeah.
And there's that heightened emotion, which is exciting, but it's not gripping. Like every single time that there's like a, give me an insight check to see if if he's really lying to you.
I think somewhere in the middle for me. I agree, it's not every single time. Especially, I think part of the fun of Calamity specifically is that these are fairly high-level players, so it's kind of fun that they roll really high all the time.
Yes.
It's just fun. But also, I think there are those really exciting moments where it's like, okay, I need to make this roll or someone's going to die. And then I think there's a whole scale in between of even something that might not seem really exciting, but then they realize, oh, this other bonus gets added on, and then that's a really cool parallel with this other character, or whatever the thing is. There's all these, if nothing else, opportunities for coincidences and things to line up, and then you can be like, what could that mean? And then people like the players or Brendan Lee Mulligan orchestrating and being like, here's how things could tie together in all of these little instances.
Can you give an example of that? What do you mean?
Like, when, I don't know, I'm not thinking of specific examples because it's a lot of little moments, but things where maybe it's just a successful attack Nidus has on a thing, and then Brendan Lee Mulligan as the DM is like, this might remind you of your pirate days in your past, and it's like a callback to something in just a little way in the middle of combat. These little moments of like, oh, Paisha, you cast this spell, and it's a spell that Laren used 20 minutes earlier, and like you guys are besties, and it's a cool tie-in. These little things.
So a really concrete example of what you're talking about is when Nidus, who has become this like wealthy merchant guy, is going, the city's going to fall apart, and so he goes back to his HQ to send his fleet of ships to go rescue people instead of what the head honchos of the city want, which is to rescue them. Yeah. Right? And so he's like, get the people out, leave all the gold in the vaults. At which point he's attacked by one of his pirate lieutenants. Yes. Who is like, you're not even a real pirate anymore. You've gone south and become a merchant. What does that even mean? But gold is more important than anything. And he attacks Nidus, right? And so in this way, mechanics of story come together in a really cool, dramatic fashion in that Nidus cast a spell on this guy to hold him in place, and then Nidus is just like, "Don't step to me, mofo," and just destroys him immediately. Like cuts him up with a sword. He's like, "Bah, get out of here."
Rolls
Other
insanely.
lieutenant, you're in.
Yeah.
We're saving people.
Yeah.
Right? And that's awesome. And that's cool. That makes a dramatic scene. So I think that's kind of an example of what you're talking about, which really heavily kind of brings in Nidus, this former pirate's characterization and backstory, and also like how the player wants to be like, what is actually important to this guy, right? He's a huge merchant who's like all about money all the time, but now when it comes down to when it's game time, what is important to him, and how does he deal with people that are an obstacle? And that comes out in a really cool way, because Brendan might have meant to like kill Nidus in that moment with this lieutenant character, because Nidus was super weak at that time, but Nidus, the player, was like, aha, I can do, I can cast a spell, I can hold him in place, and then I can destroy this guy in a super cool, dramatic fashion. That happens. I don't know that the D&D mechanicalness of it, I would like that to happen. Yes, that's cool. I didn't want to hear him roll like 8 different dice to make that happen.
Sure. I don't know. I think to an extent it can come down to, I also definitely think if you just like a more edited thing, that's just what you like more. I like seeing more of the process because I feel like I'm more invested that way. So I think that can come down to personal taste for people, where if I'm going to listen to a D&D thing and they really edit out everyone making their choices and looking over their spell lists and making the rolls and stuff, I'm like, okay, but I wanted to see that because I want to know what they're doing and feel invested as they make those choices, not just after they've made the choice.
I don't feel that way at all.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying I think is personal taste.
Right, and I think also part of this comes into like how I want to play Dungeons & Dragons, right? Because I like playing D&D, and I think I would really not like it to be at this table. There are 6 people, which is too many people. I mean, their combat, as anyone who's ever played Dungeons & Dragons know, combat takes a long time, right? Every person takes a turn in 6 seconds.
Yeah. Right? I will readily admit I bump up the speed at which I listen to it a little bit when I hit combat, but I still like to listen to all the combat.
Sure. I mean, okay. Then I think we're more in line then. I mean, you don't.
Yeah, I'm saying I understand your point. Okay. Combat is long. There's a lot of tedious parts, but I also still want to listen to it.
Yes. And just so anyone who has not listened to one of these podcasts before knows, probably a 30-second fight is going to take them like 2 hours to get through.
Yeah, easily.
So just so you know that's how this works. It's still filled with drama and action, but it is going to also be filled with people asking each other, what does silvery barbs do?
Yeah.
So I would not like to play D&D like this. 1, because there's a lot of people. 2, because it takes a long time. 3, because personally just how I like to play D&D, and this is a function of where I got into Dungeons & Dragons from, which is another D&D podcast. When they are doing these fighting and the rolls and stuff sometimes, especially when they're fighting, a lot of Brendan's beautiful description work goes out the window, and it just becomes math. And it's just, I rolled the numbers. I got 25. You do 25 points of damage to the devil. Okay, somebody else's turn. And there's a way to do that where it's like, you leap upon this horned beast and you strike it and you cause it to howl out in pain, right? Instead of just being like, all right, 25 points. All right, let's move on.
Which I think is what they do.
I think they do it a lot less than other DMs I've heard, especially in the D&D podcast space.
I think they do it with a balance that I like, because sometimes I have seen them where they do combat and it's every single turn gets that really descriptive moment, which then this is kind of going against what I said earlier. It's like they want every moment to have the same level of being descriptive and punchy and impactful, and that then makes everything feel less punchy and impactful, because they're like, even when it's just someone doing a normal sword attack and they do a normal amount of damage, they stop and they do the same amount of description as if someone does a really big spell and it kills 5 people. And I'm like, okay, so those are different. We can pause for just a second for the sword attack, and maybe we do a long description for the spell kind of thing.
Yes, in the way that you would tell a story, right?
Yeah.
Some things are important and some things are not as important to emphasize, right?
Yeah,
And that's,
but I feel like they balance it where, if a thing just happens quick and they're like, let's move on to a turn that
it's cool.
might be cooler, then they'll do a little bit of description to give it its moment, and then they move on. But also they do give descriptions to things, especially because these are all actors and improvisers kind of all the time while they're talking through these mechanics. They're like, I take my really intricate, ornate blade and I whatever the thing is.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to kind of note that I was thinking about while I was listening to this is, and I want to talk about this more in just a second, but Critical Role is almost more like an audio drama than playing Dungeons and Dragons in your basement.
I was also actually about to say it.
But something that's interesting about it is that using D&D to make this audio drama is like the closest I can think of to a somewhat interesting action scene like you might have in a movie, right? Because, the podcast that comes to mind is I recently listened to He'll Do the Bar Back in the Lake of Fire, which is a kind of a classic fantasy story.
Yeah.
And there's like some action sequences, but in an audio drama, there's only so much you can do, especially without a narrator, right? You can just put like shing sound effects and like hoo and hoo, but you don't really know what to imagine, and it's not cool, and you don't care.
Yep.
Right? Not in the same way that, a film can be like, all right, we're just not going to do any more dialogue or advance the plot for a while. We need Spider-Man to fight the Hulk.
Yeah.
And we're just going to show them beating each other up, and people in the seats will go, yay!
Yippee!
Right? Everyone likes a little action sequence now and then.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to me that D&D, it allows for that in a way that I haven't heard from other audio dramas. Now, while those action sequences can still be cool, are they still long? Yes.
Yes.
Very true.
Absolutely.
So, we both just mentioned this. The Critical Role is more like an audio drama than playing Dungeons & Dragons. I feel like this is kind of true. Because all of the players, they're actors or voice actors. It's not like playing D&D in your home.
Yes. Which this is a very big thing where, especially because Critical Role was something that got really big in online D&D spaces, is a thing that helped massively repopularize D&D. For a lot of people, the way they learned about D&D or started to potentially get into D&D was from either Critical Role itself or one of the many shows that have come up in sort of the boom that Critical Role inspired.
This led to, I think, a greater conversation about Dungeons and Dragons on the internet and in the real world.
Yeah, but this has also led to, I've heard just lots of anecdotal stories about people who then, after hearing, want to get into D&D and want to try something, but they either intimidate themselves out of it because they think Critical Role is the way that D&D works, which it's really a very unrealistic idea of how D&D will go when you go play it with your friends, and you really shouldn't think of it like that because it's a hugely produced show with professionals. Or they will go and try to play and they have those expectations and then they're really disappointed and they feel like it's not living up to what they want. So that is an interesting sort of side effect of how popular Critical Role has gone, and is another way that it's, I think if nothing else, maybe helpful for people to think of it as D&D play and audio drama, because it is this very produced, it's got real professionals on it. No one else in the world is doing the kind of DMing work that Matthew Mercer's doing, where he comes up with all these histories and things. So it's just a different thing.
Right, and if you watch this online, you're going to see them have these, set pieces with little miniature statuettes of the different characters doing battles with different little, miniatures of the Zorgon or whatever fantasy creature they're fighting, and they're going to be in this beautiful the final set piece for this show. They had a little tiny stained glass window and all this other set dressing on this little map. This is a for-profit company. This is
Yeah.
not how.
It's insane.
I mean, there's always been the hyper-interested, hyper-involved D&D
Yes.
players who do that kind of stuff.
But you don't have to. It shouldn't be the baseline, which
Yes.
it, for a lot of people, became after they saw Critical Role and were like, I want to do that. You shouldn't expect to do that in your first game.
Right. The other thing, and I guess I should know why I'm talking about, there's miniatures and stuff. This as a podcast, if you're listening to this as a podcast, there's going to be sometimes where they reference physical things in front of them that really you're meant to see if you're watching the video on Twitch or YouTube. So it's not usually a big deal. There was one time where I was like, I want to see what they're talking about, so I went to look up the video on YouTube. So, but just know, this is one of those kind of podcasts as an afterthought almost situation.
Yes.
So there's that kind of part about how this is not like D&D, but the other kind of part about how this is not like a normal person's Dungeons and Dragons is the actors, right? I think you're going to disagree with me on this.
Okay.
Because all the players are actors, a lot of times when it was their turn, they had to do something, not like in combat, but like, we're discussing what's our next steps. What is the mystery afoot here? It felt like a lot of them talking were these long, almost over serious soliloquies about, this is what I saw in my dream. I've been thinking for such time, but I've been so alone since my husband left me. What am I to do? Dear friends, let us think back. And it's just like, that's also not how D&D is played. It's not, because they are actors without a script. They're trying to improv this story. And as much as a lot of times when you and me, people who like Dungeons and Dragons, talk about D&D and D&D stories, we put a lot of emphasis on the DM as the storyteller. But real stories have to have characters. Yeah. Right? And when you play D&D, you're interested in the characters because you are one, right? And that's why it's like, if there's literally nothing interesting about your character, it can still be fun because you get to hit the skeleton army or whatever. Yeah. These people have to improv what is interesting. Yeah. And while I think they're all great improvers and great actors, a lot of times I just felt them seeking for what? Because it's not like silly improv, right? It's not like you're going to an improv show where they're like, oh, we're doing silly things. And because improv is a little inherently silly. They're improvising. It's supposed to be very serious stuff. They're supposed to be creating drama and intrigue between each other and between these other characters that Brennan is playing. And so a lot of times it just felt like, sometimes it felt like they were literally searching for the next thing to do, which makes sense, right? That's how a lot of D&D works. But it's literally like, what do we do next? What do we do next? I don't know. But sometimes even during these interactions, it's like very clearly the player does not know how they're supposed to handle this, what is interesting or what is a good direction to take it. And so it just feels like a lot of talking with no meaning, right? There, I think, are several interactions which are like, did that do anything at all, actually? Like, nothing really came of that, right? Sometimes they're trying to interrogate a guy, but that guy isn't supposed to give them any information. Like, that's a normal D&D thing. But it's just like, okay, this is not really going anywhere. Or, sometimes it felt like they were talking to each other and they were trying to come up with theories of what was going on. And I'm like, and this is also a normal D&D thing that happens. I feel like the players had forgotten what the DM had told other players or what they had been told. They're like, wait, what are we doing again? But they're all trying to do it in this serious way. And it's like, I sit around myself and I say that the magisterium, it felt in this way that I'm like, I appreciate that these are all people who I think are very good at what they do, and this is a hard thing to do. Yeah. But it still, I don't think, results in a great story. It still results in a lot of time where it's like, you have no idea what's going on. You're trying to come up with some plan that is interesting and create something interesting to happen, and that might factor in later. But you guys don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, I could see where that comes from. I could think of a couple moments where you're right. Sometimes it is clear that they're trying to which I think it can also differ from table to table, whether they're going to be the kind of table to just break character and be like, okay, guys, what do we want to do next? Or where they're going to try to feel out within character dialogue what the gang wants to do. So, yeah, those can sometimes happen, and you can kind of tell. I don't know if I ever felt like... I never super felt like it was a detriment, because I enjoyed hearing these characters talk. And I don't know if I ever felt like it was as extreme as you're saying it was. Like,
Sure.
It was definitely sometimes a background thing, but I never felt like that's all that's happening here, and there's no meaning to whatever's happening.
Yeah. And also, to be clear, like, that's not every time, right?
Yeah, no.
And I think another reason that Brennan is a good DM is because he can take he'll take some of those interactions and bring them back later. Right?
Yes,
and that's a great
absolutely.
DM move, because when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you are just improvising.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of times the player doesn't have a plan. And so when Brennan's like Sarah talks to his kid for a little bit,
Yeah.
right? And then Brennan brings that back at the end.
Ugh, yeah.
And really fills out a scene
Mm-hmm.
that the player for Sarah wanted to happen. That feels great. And it's just excellent work, and the acting is great. Double thumbs
Massively
up.
agree. Yeah. And I think, so I kind of wanted to hear all of your thoughts on things, on the story and the game, because it seems like those are sort of different things for you. And then I would respond, because those are extremely interlinked for my experience. I really love actual play podcasts because of, like I said earlier, that investment that I feel when I'm listening along as these people go through this process where they get really invested and I get really invested. For actual play with like D&D in particular, that system that they're using to tell a story, I really love the balance of chance and choice that exists. And it is this whole process of them improvising, of them trying to figure out, okay, what is the next thing that we want to do? What's the thing that feels important for me as a character to be focusing on? What's a choice I, as an actor and player, can make to really exemplify, show the players at my table and show the audience what is mattering to me in this moment. And that's something I find really intriguing, and because there's this level of commitment, I am also invested and want to hear more. So when they're searching for these choices to make, I think in a similar way to where I'm like, I don't necessarily hate hearing all of the little parts of combat, because I like hearing this build-up of how they get to the final choice and the final roll that they make to hit the big bad guy. It is this process and journey to me that is a big part of the story, of going, okay, especially in a world as rich and fleshed out as the one that Brennan has made here, we have all these billion choices in front of us of points of intrigue, people we can talk to, things we can do. What are the ones that feel important and that we want to pursue? That is the thing that feels really impactful to me about this story. And then I think in Calamity specifically, this tragedy, which is something really ambitious that not a lot of actual play stories have attempted, because it's very hard to do an actual play thing when the end is already determined and not have it feel really stilted, because then it feels like none of those choices matter. I really liked what Calamity did, where it was really about that process of how they got from one point to the other and little things that they could do along the way. In the end, they never were going to be able to stop the Calamity. They're not going to be the people who save the world. In a lot of ways, they helped lead to the Calamity, like with Laren's plan to make the city move dimensions, and then some of those mechanisms were taken by the demons and helped their plan. It's like, okay, she contributed to that. Maybe some of you guys are the bad guys, But also, she was able to do that last ritual so that the other devils couldn't come into the world. Or Nidus sending out the ships to rescue the regular civilians. So it's these little things. This is just getting at what I like about the story overall, which is that it's the interaction of this system of telling a story where it's these little choices they could make. And anytime there's a dice roll involved, there's a chance for failure. But there's also, especially in this tragedy story, where a lot of the DCs, they had to roll really high to make things happen. Then when those things do happen, it feels like a moment of joy or hope in the middle of this really bad thing. It's like, okay, we can't save the world, but we were able to use the powers that we have, and we were strong enough to get Saret's kids out of the city, etc., whatever the thing is. So this is my big, here's how I feel about the story and what I like. And is also me tying together some of the points we've brought up already. Yeah.
It's a big box of thoughts.
Yeah.
And I see that you kind of take it in more of a whole stance. One of the things that you kind of said at the beginning was that part of the reason that you're invested is because you really like listening to these people be invested, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're playing and you're kind of vicariously kind of playing through them, but you're like, I see how much you're committed, and that makes me really interested.
Mm-hmm. Or even just witnessing all the steps of why a person would get committed, because you're seeing all these dice rolls happen and like the process of playing. As that happens, I'm like, okay, yeah, I've seen 3 dice fail already. I want the next one to roll good.
Yeah, and I think that's like an element, like the element of chance is part of Dungeons and Dragons, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily feel invested because of seeing the player's investment.
Mm.
It was much more just like a normal story, like an audio drama for me.
Mm-hmm.
I got interested because of the story, right? Because I'm like, okay, I want to see where this story goes. We've got some interesting characters. I've learned some things about them. Where do they go? How do they interact with each other? Like that's, you know, it's still kind of, the D&D part did not necessarily get me more. I'm more interested in this story. I'm more interested in the next step because of the D&D stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, those were two, to me, D&D is a vehicle for telling mechanisms and is not, certainly it as a format changes what kind of stories are told and how the stories shake out. And if I'm playing, you know, how much I care, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when listening to them play D&D did not make me go, I'm more interested because they're playing D&D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think that this is something that can definitely differ for people. I think there's an extent to which, if it's done well or poorly, it can definitely, just in the production and how people do it, make it better or worse. There might be some D&D shows that are done really well, and so you like them, but you don't like ones that are done poorly, etc. But I also think personal taste, as far as, I'm not quite sure how to put it, because I can definitely understand your stance, because EXU Calamity is an instance where that process of D&D and it being a D&D story really adds something for me because of the level of chance in the face of really horrible odds where the devil is here. But also, things just being D&D does not inherently make things more investing for me. Like, if there's kind of nothing that makes me feel cornier than when I just see a clip from Critical Role of someone getting a nat 20 and I don't know the context or anything, and it feels like the cheesiest thing in the world when they roll a little die and then everyone starts screaming and I'm like, nat 20, okay.
Yes, because it's like, that's the best possible thing that can happen.
Yeah.
But devoid of a story, you don't really care.
Yeah.
It's and like, wow, that was a 1 in 20 chance of happening.
Yeah. And just, I think there was something you said earlier about sometimes a thing is so sincere that it makes you like cringe a little bit. And I think that can come down to just personal taste of stuff.
I think that's what this all is. I mean,
For sure,
we listen to the same thing. I mean, us is a difference in taste, and hopefully, listener, you know which one of us you align with more.
Yeah, I think that was my conclusion here, is saying I think there's some podcasts that I think we would review, and it feels less like this one, if we recommend it or not, it doesn't come down to personal taste. We just think this one's good or bad. I think this one could come down a lot to listener taste, especially because I think D&D, like that kind of, for lack of a better way to say it, like very nerdy storytelling, if it's your type of thing, it might add something for you. If it doesn't, it could even potentially subtract something and make you, even if you would hypothetically like this really tragic story, which I do, if you don't like the medium, then you don't want to listen to it.
I'm gonna say my rating. I've been thinking while you're talking, and I think I've got my number.
Tell me.
If you like D&D, well, this is a podcast. I think is a 3 out of 5. It's interesting. It's slightly above average. It's not bad, but it's not exceptional. It's not like, I would not be like, do you like podcasts? Go listen to this. If you like D&D, I think it's like a 3.7.
Okay.
I think it's interesting, right? I think it's, as someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons and is often, the game master, the dungeon master behind the screen, listening to this, super interesting for me. Gives me a bunch of ideas and like, oh, next time I, get some friends together, oh, I could do this. Oh, I see what they did there. That's fun. Right?
Yeah.
I think the story, which is what I want. If this is closer to an audio drama, then I care about the story.
Yeah.
I don't really care how people make an audio drama. I think it's fine. I think it's just fine.
It makes me feel a little insane.
Well, I hate to be the one to break the news. No, I think it's just fine. I didn't like cry when we got to the end or anything. You know what I mean? Like, I knew what was going to happen. So for me, that's just like a thing in stories. When I know the end, like, I care a little less because I know how everything's going to turn out.
I just have to point out that you're such a weird little finicky animal.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Where you hate when something doesn't have an ending ready for you to get to as soon as possible.
Yes.
But also, if you already know it, also bad.
The journey is about the end. If I know the end, then no need to go on the journey. And if there is no end, there's no need to go on the journey. I know this. I'm simplifying my thoughts, and I know this is. I don't know. It's not crazy. No, I'm normal. He says as he sweatily points to his own brain.
Yeah.
Eyes wide. Yeah. Like I said, I didn't cry when I got to the end. I didn't
either.
Sure.
But I love it.
Yeah. I wasn't that super invested in the characters. Some of the things that happened at the end, I'm like, okay, they die. Okay, they kiss. All right, he leaves. I'm like, it's not like I was not invested at all. It's not like I was like, oh, anything can happen. Right? I don't care. But also, I was like, whatever. Like, that's almost an exaggeration.
Yeah.
I think the story that was told was fairly interesting, but there's a lot to it that doesn't really go anywhere, that doesn't really need to happen, that isn't totally explained. There's some things that are like just okay. Like the climactic battle is between this random wizard guy who I know we've been investigating, but it's just like he's just showed up, so he doesn't like. He's not even the bad guy. He
also changed Xerxes' pact with the
I know, but that's
thing.
It's not that big of a deal. Like, I know that was like a cool moment, and I don't know what Brennan actually planned to happen. For context, if you haven't listened to it, this wizard guy, Xerxes, who is a paladin, gave him some divine redemption for just a period of time to like re-bring his humanity back to his forefront, and he saved Xerxes from his pact with the devil again for a brief time.
Until dawn.
Sure. But like, this guy is such a minor character for the rest of the show. Why? And for most of the show, I thought he was just dead. And I was like, what is... Like, I don't understand why this is the guy. Maybe they were supposed to find out more about this guy or meet him earlier. I don't really understand. So it's also... Like, their enemy is the devil, who is out there, but he doesn't show up in the final battle. Which is strange. And then...
He's ruining the world. Also, they're not gonna beat the devil.
I know that. You can still tell a story. And also random robots. Random robots are also the enemies. It just feels like a strange climax. Like, this is their great opposition. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I feel like there are some other moments like that. That is an example for me. And so that is all to me, like, I think the story was okay. I didn't think it was great. It wasn't a Chrysalis. Wasn't a Midnight Burger Season 2. It was not even a Wolf 359.
Wow.
Yeah.
That feels... Wow.
It's not like a slam dunk. Wolf 359, there's more. I like, I mean, maybe because it took 1 billion hours to get through, but I was more invested at the end. But if you like D&D, yeah, I think this might do something for you. If you like D&D, I would still recommend you other podcasts first that are more considerate of your time.
Wow. Considerate of your time feels harsh.
I know, but that is what I mean. That it's not going to take so much time for you and have an equivalent or maybe better story.
That feels wild. I definitely have recommended Calamity to people who are like, I want to get into D&D. I've heard maybe a couple things. I'm like, Calamity is a fairly self-contained, but if you want to see some of the really intense things D&D can do, here's Calamity. It's wild and I love it.
I think Calamity would be good to recommend to someone if you wanted to show them that D&D is really long. Like, if you want to show them like, kind of the underbelly of Dungeons and Dragons a little bit.
This feels crazier the more you talk.
Dude, I'm not wrong.
I think you might be.
If you wanted to show people Dungeons and Dragons as a storytelling mechanism, I think there's better podcasts.
If you wanted to show know.
That, I disagree.
Okay, I'm going to talk now.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to you anymore. I think... I was going to try to split up my ratings, but I'm just going to give one. Because, again, I think these things, for me, are more related of, like, it as a story on its own and it as a D&D thing. I would say probably 4 or more. Fluctuating, depending on how much you like D&D.
If you like D&D, it will go above 4.
It will go up.
Based on, what kind of freak you are.
Well, based on what kind of freak you are. I both agree and disagree on the ending. I think it's not necessarily that exact same steep rise until climax and then the climax is the thing. It's still, there is the climactic battle at the end. There's that one last ritual they do of, okay, maybe we can avert some of the evil. Maybe there can be less devils in the world. And that's cool, but also the devil's already here. There's elements of that where, like, afterward, when Laren and Loquacious kiss, I'm like, okay, that's cool. But also, the big peak of all the things that have already happened for those characters has already happened. It feels more like a wind down part of it than this is supposed to be the climactic moment for them. When even that last real thing that happens when Sarah manages to escape the city as it's crashing, even that, like, that is maybe the biggest moment of, like, okay, maybe it's not all bad in the middle of the calamity. But even that is, like, not, is like, huge, climactic, really intense thing. It is a culmination of things that have happened. Even, you're like, they fight these random robots. That even, sure, it's like the robots, we're not invested in the robots, but also, since the beginning, there have been robots that have been tampered with. This is a tie-in to, we've seen signs.
It's a tie-in to, like, a Z plot, okay? It's like,
it's been in the background for the whole thing.
But why is it, like, and it's during, like, the final moments, like, this is the thing?
Because the final moment, it's less about that fight, and it's about Laren being able to finish this last ritual to avert some of the evil, and then everyone else is defending her, buying her time, and she's doing this work. So, I think it's really good. I really like it. I think all the moments leading up, it feels like a story that is a process more than a lead up to a single climactic battle. Which I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it is in my brain. And I think it's really good. I really think the characters are good. I think there's interesting things they do. I think Brennan Lee Mulligan is really good at what he does. And I like it.
I think if you like D&D and you got some free time, roughly 19 hours, if you are driving, I don't know, cross country, is that how, like, we should start measuring the length of a podcast? All right, so if you started
if
in
you
Baltimore,
drive to Alaska,
yeah, then chuck it on. Go through the first episode, see if you like it. It'll get more dramatic after that. I mean, you've already listened to what happens, but if you like, maybe after I want to say give it a try, but it'll be 2 hours before you know everyone who's sitting around the table.
Be patient.
That's crazy.
That's how I feel.
If you don't like D&D podcast, I'm gonna say it. This is not the one to start with. If you don't,
I think it's the one to start with if you like really intense tragedies, which sometimes has been why I've recommended it to people, because they're like, I want to hear about people being really sad, and I'm like, you want to hear one where everyone dies?
Okay, we'll listen to a different D&D podcast that I've listened to that I think does this without all the stuff that I don't like.
Okay,
or without most of it.
I'm excited.
After all that, I think I gotta go. I gotta go home. I gotta crawl under my player's handbook, which is the biggest book that I own.
Yeah.
I just gotta go take a nap. I gotta decompress from all this, all the clams,
all the calamity.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about with that, Honor? I think we kind of hit it in a big way. It's a big podcast. It's a short podcast
big.
if you're strange.
It's normal length.
I truly disagree.
It is.
And it's interesting.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, I liked it. I know that I said a lot of negative things.
I wondered.
But I was like, oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make me want to listen to the rest of Critical Role? No, not really.
It's also quite different from the rest of Critical Role.
Sure. I think it might be the things that were problems for me in this, I think will be the same in other things. Maybe. Yeah. So that's one Critical Role mini-series.
Isn't that awesome?
So maybe one day when we're 80 years old, we'll have gotten through all the different Critical Role miniseries and we can start on their main series.
You can do it way faster than that.
I don't believe that. And you know what else I don't believe? That
we have an email.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Email us at podpodcastcast@gmail.com. Also, leave us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you freaking get it, go down and put 5 stars.
5.
Next time, well, if you're like 5 stars, more Critical Role.
We'll listen to at least 5 episodes.
Whoa, that's going to take a lot of stars. Do all that, and then we'll see you next time. Honor, thank you for podding with me.
Thank you for podding with me.
I'm glad this didn't take 19 hours.
Yeah. Bye!
Your quest to find the evil wizard has brought you to a simple oaken door inside the catacombs. What do?
I cast Fireball.
The door explodes, and inside you see an old man draped in blood-red robes. And he looks up and says, "Welcome."
I cast Fireball.
Fuck off!